Hello everyone and welcome to the 28th episode of Japanese Phonetics by Dogen. In this episode we'll be covering the pitch accent of question words and phrases. Let's get straight into it. If you've been following the series thus far, you'll know that the pitch accent for standard question words is atamadaka. Thus, the pitch accent for words such as dare, doko, dore, do, nani, naze, nande, ikura, itsu is atamadaka.
誰、誰、誰、どこ、どこ、どこ、どれ、どれ、どれ、どう、どう、どう、何、何、何、なぜ、なぜ、なぜ、なんで、なんで、なんで、いくら、いくら、いくら、いつ、いつ、いつ。
We've covered this before, so it shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. But what about when other words, standard words such as nouns, are used as question words? Well, we're typically told to create a rising intonation or a rising inflection. This is true, but the practice can be a little bit trickier than most people realize. The reason for this is that much like how a native English speaker has the tendency to say a heibang verb as a nakalaka verb, they also have the tendency to change the pitch accent pattern of a word when that word is said as a question. For example, despite saying sensei with the correct nakalaka pitch accent when saying it as a statement, many native English speakers will say sensei when saying it as a question. Likewise, despite saying inu with the correct oraka pitch accent pattern in statements, many native English speakers will say inu when saying it as a question. Again, this is incorrect. Additionally, many native English speakers won't change the pitch accent family of a word when making it a question, but they'll say the wrong pitch accent family, which they've always used for that particular word, but in a more exaggerated, more noticeable way. For example, many English natives will say imoto instead of the correct imoto.
妹、妹、妹、妹、妹、妹。
Rather than changing the pitch accent family of this word when saying it as a question, they'll say the same wrong pitch accent, but in a much more noticeable way. Rather than saying imoto, which is wrong, they'll say imoto, which is more noticeably wrong.
妹、妹、妹、妹、妹、妹。
Native English speakers often have inaccurate intuitions with regards to Japanese pitch accent, and this becomes more noticeable when dealing with question words. Thus, it's best if we try and be conscious of how we say questions, at least during the earlier stages of our phonetic studies. Okay, so how do we say words in question form in Japanese? Well, as mentioned earlier, we say them as we normally would, but we add a slight rising inflection. Don't worry about exaggerating the other phonetic characteristics of the word. This will come naturally. For now, concentrate on adding a rising inflection to the standard pitch accent of the word. This is a bit tricky at first, but it becomes quite easy once you get the hang of it. Let's start with an atamadaka word that we covered earlier. Neko. If we say this normally, it's neko. But if we want to say it as a question, we have to add a rising inflection. This results in neko. Notice how the pitch accent is still atamadaka, but there is a slight rise in ko. In other words, the pitch still starts high and goes low, but rises ever so slightly at the end. This is a little bit difficult to notice or reproduce when we're only looking at the standard form or only looking at the question form, but it becomes immediately noticeable when we put the two forms together.
猫、 猫、猫、猫、猫、猫、どこ、どこ、どこ、どこ、どこ、どこ、なに、なに、なに、なに、なに、なに。
Great. Now that we've done this for the Atamadaka family, let's move on to Nakadaka, Odaka, and Heibang. Remember, the pitch accent family does not change. We just add a slight rising inflection to the end of the word.
お箸、お箸、お箸、お箸、お箸、お箸、食べる、食べる、食べる、食べる、食べる、食べる、犬、犬、犬、犬、犬、犬、妹、妹、妹、妹、妹、妹。
Note again that it's imoto and not imoto.
妹、妹、妹、妹。車、車、車、車、車、車。財布、財布、財布、財布、財布、財布。
Again, it's kuruma and saifu, not kuruma and saifu.
車、車、車、車。財布、財布、財布、財布。
The pitch accent family doesn't change. We just add a slight rising inflection to the end of the word. Okay, so we've learned how to change individual words into questions, but how do we do this at the phrase level? I intend on covering this more in the next episode, which will cover how emotion affects pitch accent, but the short answer is to articulate whichever bit of the phrase that you're trying to emphasize in a distinctly clear manner. For example, in the following sentence, did Ken throw a red ball? We could say, did Ken throw a red ball? Did Ken throw a red ball? Or did Ken throw a red ball? Depending on what we're trying to emphasize. Now in Japanese, the particles can change a little bit due to differences in grammar, but the same general phonetic phenomenon occurs. I won't get too much more into this topic today as there will be a lot of overlap with the next lesson on emotion. Just remember to articulate whatever part of the phrase you're trying to emphasize in a distinctly clear manner. All right, let's get into the summary for today's lesson. Number 1, standard question words such as dore, nani, itsu are atamadaka.
どれ、どれ、何、何、いつ、いつ。
2. Native English speakers have the tendency to wrongly change the pitch accent pattern of a word or to over-enunciate the incorrect pitch accent pattern of a word when that word is said as a question. To combat this, I recommend that you try and be conscious when saying question words and to practice saying words from different pitch accent families in both their standard and question form. To change a word into a question, use the standard pitch accent pattern but add a slight rising inflection.
車、車、車、車。
Again, make sure that you're not changing the pitch accent family or exaggerating the wrong pitch accent pattern. Both of these are very common mistakes. Okay guys, that's all for this lesson. I hope that you found it useful. In the next episode, we'll be talking about how emotion affects pitch accent, primarily at the sentence level. As always, if you have any questions or concerns, feel free to leave a comment below. Thank you very much for the continued support and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.